Welcome back to This Is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to talk about Commander Tough Rules and Cool Interactions, episode 47. Today's episode is going to take a look at a weird interaction with a very old card that has some crazy wording on it, which means that we will have to take a look at the Oracle text of the card to see what it actually does in the current version of Magic. And this old card is Necromancy, and the new card that we will have it interact with is Oscar Rubbish Reclaimer. So let's take a look and read what these cards do. Here is an image of Necromancy as it was printed back in Visions in 1996. And now, let's take a look at what its Oracle text is. You may cast Necromancy as though it had flash. If you cast it anytime a sorcery couldn't have been cast, the controller of the permanent it becomes sacrifices it at the beginning of the next cleanup step. When Necromancy enters the battlefield, if it's on the battlefield, it becomes an aura with Enchant Creature put onto the battlefield with Necromancy. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control and attach Necromancy to it. When Necromancy leaves the battlefield, that creature's controller sacrifices it. Okay, so now let's check out what Oscar, one of the two, we'll go with Oscar for the video, and how he will make Necromancy a little puzzling. I will say this is not something unique to Oscar. There are other cards that can allow for this kind of interaction, but this is the specific card used in the game that I was watching with some other players tonight, and it seemed like a good fit for the example for this video. Oscar has the triggered ability that says, whenever you discard a non-land card, you may cast it from your graveyard. So just a little basic review about enchantments, but according to Comprehensive Rules 303.1, a player who has priority may cast an enchantment card from their hand during a main phase of their turn when the stack is empty. This is often regarded as Sorcery Speed, and if you want some more info on priority and what it means to be Sorcery Speed, I'm doing air quotes there, check out one of my older videos, Tough Rules and Cool Interactions episode 7, which goes into more detail about that. In Magic, we have lots of things that get around this timing restriction of Sorcery Speed. We can see in Comprehensive Rules 601.3 that a player can begin to cast a spell only if a rule or effect allows that player to cast it, and no rule or effect prohibits that player from casting it. Now, I hope I haven't lost you, or at least a lot of you yet, so far in thinking that this is much more simple than it is. Some of you may already have noticed where I'm going with this, but I'd say most of you probably didn't pick up on what exactly makes this interaction tricky. So let's read the Oracle text on Necromancy one more time. The first part of it says that you may cast Necromancy as though it had flash. If you cast it anytime a sorcery couldn't have been cast, the controller of the permanent it becomes sacrifices it at the beginning of the next cleanup step. And the specific part that we're looking at is the if you cast it anytime a sorcery couldn't have been cast part. So here's a scenario. Your opponent attacks and damages you with a creature that has a Sword of Feast and Famine equipped on it. So it causes you to discard a card, and the card you choose to discard is Necromancy. You then have the trigger happen from Oscar, and you use that to cast the Necromancy, which is not being cast in your main phase, and therefore not during a time that a sorcery could have been cast. What will happen at the beginning of the next cleanup step? Will you have to sacrifice the Necromancy? Before I give the answer here, I'm going to give you a hint. If a spell has flash, flash is actually an ability, which I know for some of you this is obvious, but that means that using Necromancy's ability that gives it flash and then casting it that way is what makes us have to go through all the aspects of that ability. Okay, maybe that hint helped, or maybe it actually just confused some of you, hopefully the former. Alright, enough of this hint stuff, now on to the answer. If you were to cast Necromancy via Oscar, you would not have to sacrifice the Necromancy at the beginning of the next cleanup step. The reason for this is sort of touched on back in one of my earlier episodes, episode 34 of Tough Rules and Cool Interactions, which covered line breaks in paragraphs on cards. In this case, we have to look at the part of Necromancy that says that we have to sacrifice it, and we will see that it's not just a line by itself that reads, at the beginning of the next end step, if Necromancy was cast when a sorcery spell couldn't have been cast, then sacrifice it. In which case, it would have to be, but its sacrifice text is part of the first paragraph of text that all makes up the first ability of that card. So, if we don't begin that ability, we don't have to do any of that rest of the ability. In this case, we didn't cast it via the flash granted to it by its own first ability. We cast it as part of the resolution of the triggered ability on Oscar, so we never need to do any of the following steps in that first paragraph. Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you found this video to be entertaining, at least, and I hope that even a few of you may have even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. Have a good one. Ta-ta.